I'm Morgan Taylor, 25 years old, and I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered in my childhood home's living room. "We're giving Amber $80,000 for her Paris study program," my father announced proudly. Then, looking directly at me, he added, "But you? You don't deserve any help." The words hung in the air like poison. My mother nodded in agreement while my sister couldn't meet my eyes. A flashback to last month's family dinner when they'd dismissed my dreams played through my mind. That was the moment I decided to show them exactly what I was capable of. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Growing up in our upper-middle-class suburban home in Boston, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of my own achievements. My father, Richard, was a successful attorney with his own practice, specializing in corporate law. My mother, Diane, worked as a hospital administrator at one of Boston's prestigious medical centers. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Two successful parents, a beautiful home, and two daughters who seemed to have every advantage in life. But behind closed doors, there was an invisible scale that never seemed to balance. My sister Amber is 3 years younger than me, with the same dark hair as our mother but none of her drive. From early childhood, she was labeled the creative one, the sensitive soul of the family who needed extra nurturing and attention. I was simply the smart one, as if being academically inclined somehow made me less deserving of emotional support. I still remember my 8th birthday when I asked for a chemistry set. My parents got me one, but it was the basic version from the department store. 6 months later, when Amber expressed a passing interest in watercolors, they enrolled her in private art classes with a renowned local artist and converted our guest room into a studio. "Amber needs encouragement to find her passion," my mother explained when I questioned the disparity. "You're already so self-motivated, Morgan." Being labeled self-motivated became my curse. Every achievement was met with a casual, "Of course you did well, that's what you do," while Amber's C+ in basic math was celebrated with dinner out because she really tried this time. By high school, the pattern was firmly established. I joined every academic club, maintained a perfect GPA, and secured the valedictorian spot, all while working part-time at the local library. The day I received my acceptance letter to State University with a full academic scholarship, my father nodded and said, "Well, that's fortunate. We can focus on Amber's college fund now." My graduation ceremony should have been one of the proudest days of my life. As valedictorian, I delivered a speech that received a standing ovation from the crowd. My parents attended, of course, but their celebration was subdued. "Let's not make too big a deal," my mother whispered. "Amber has her art show next weekend, and we don't want to overshadow that." The contrast became even more stark when college began. I attended State University on my scholarship, living in a cramped dorm room and working 3 part-time jobs to cover expenses my scholarship didn't. Meanwhile, Amber was accepted to Westfield College, a private art school with tuition nearly 4 times what my school cost. My parents paid for everything: tuition, a private apartment, art supplies, and a monthly allowance. Amber's pursuing a specialized degree in a competitive field, my father justified. She needs to focus entirely on her studies. When I pointed out that I was also in a competitive program, pre-law with business administration, he simply replied, "But you're different, Morgan. You've always been so capable and independent. Amber needs more support to thrive." During my junior year of college, I approached my parents about graduate school. I had researched programs and calculated costs, and asked if they could help since I'd saved them money by earning a scholarship for undergrad. "We always plan to help you with grad school," my mother had assured me. But when acceptance letters came during my senior year, their tune changed. "We've had some unexpected expenses with Amber's program," my father explained. "She needed to extend another year since she changed her concentration. Your mother and I just can't help you right now." I took out loans and continued working multiple jobs through my MBA program. I told myself it would all be worth it when I graduated and could finally prove my worth through a successful career. Little did I know that the real betrayal was yet to come. It was a crisp autumn evening when my parents invited me for dinner, saying they had big family news to share. I arrived at their house, still wearing my work clothes, having rushed over directly from my office job that I'd secured right after completing my MBA. The familiar scent of my mother's roast beef filled the air, a dish she only prepared for special occasions. As I stepped inside, I noticed Amber was already there, perched on the living room sofa, practically bouncing with excitement. My father was pouring champagne, another sign that whatever news they had was significant. My mother bustled in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron and beaming at Amber. "Morgan, you made it," she said, as if surprised I would show up to a family dinner I'd been specifically invited to attend. During dinner, I tried to share my own news. I've been researching business degree specializations that could help me eventually join or support Dad's practice, I said between bites. I found a program that combines legal and business administration that would be perfect. My father hardly looked up from his plate. Sounds expensive. Besides, I've got Malcolm handling the business side of things now. Malcolm was his partner's son, who had half my qualifications but twice my father's attention. Before I could respond, my mother clinked her glass. "Well, we actually have exciting news to share." She looked at Amber, who was practically glowing. "I've been accepted to the International Arts program in Paris," Amber announced. "It's super selective. They only take 20 students each year from around the world." "That's great," I said, genuinely happy for my sister despite our complicated relationship. "How long is the program?" 2 years, my father said proudly. "It's an incredible opportunity. The connections she'll make there will set her up for life." My mother reached across the table to squeeze Amber's hand. "We're so proud of you, sweetie." "And," my father continued, raising his glass, "your mother and I are covering all expenses. Tuition, housing, living expenses, everything. It comes to about $80,000 total, but it's worth every penny for our artist." I nearly choked on my water. $80,000? When they couldn't spare anything for my graduate education? "Wow," I said carefully. "That's incredibly generous. I'm happy for you, Amber." There must have been something in my tone, because my father's expression hardened. "You know, Morgan, not everything is about you. This is Amber's moment." "I didn't say it was about me," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I just said I was happy for her." "Well, your face says otherwise," my mother chimed in. "You've always been jealous of your sister." I set my fork down, my appetite gone. "That's not true. I'm just surprised that you can afford to spend $80,000 on Amber's program when you told me you couldn't help with my graduate school at all." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Amber stared at her plate, while my parents exchanged a look I'd seen many times before. "That's different," my father finally said. "Amber needs this opportunity. You've always been able to figure things out on your own." "So I'm being punished for being self-sufficient?" I asked. My father's face flushed red. The warning sign I knew well from childhood. "No, Morgan. You're simply not getting rewarded for it. Amber has a special talent that needs nurturing. You're already established in your career." "I'm just starting my career," I corrected him. "And I have student loans to pay off because you chose an expensive graduate program without consulting us." My mother interrupted. "I did consult you. You said you'd help. And then you backed out." My father slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "Enough. This is exactly why we're supporting Amber and not you. She appreciates what we do for her. You just demand more and more." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. When have I ever demanded anything? I worked through school, earned scholarships, took out loans. "And you're so proud of yourself for it, aren't you?" my mother said coldly. "Always thinking you're better than everyone else because you work so hard." "We're giving Amber this opportunity because she deserves it," my father stated firmly. "And frankly, Morgan, you don't deserve any help. You've made that abundantly clear with your attitude." The words hit me like physical blows. I stood frozen, staring at my family, my father's angry face, my mother's dismissive expression, and Amber's obvious discomfort. Without another word, I walked upstairs to my old bedroom, which had remained largely untouched since I left for college. Once inside, I closed the door and sank to the floor, finally letting the tears come. How could they say I didn't deserve help? When had I ever not deserved their support? After composing myself, I began looking through my old desk drawers, searching for a photograph I suddenly wanted to take with me. In the back of the bottom drawer, I found something unexpected. A folder of old financial documents I'd stored there during my college application process. Curious, I opened it. Inside were copies of my parents' financial aid forms from when I was applying to colleges. As I scanned the papers, my blood ran cold. They had listed substantial college funds for both Amber and me, equal amounts. Yet they had told me repeatedly that they couldn't afford to help with my education because they were saving for Amber's more expensive arts education. It was all there in black and white, years of lies and unequal treatment, documented in their own handwriting. When I confronted them with the papers, showing them proof of their deception, my father snatched the documents from my hands. "You had no right to keep these," he said. "And you're misinterpreting everything, as usual. We always planned to help you both equally, but circumstances changed." "What circumstances?" I demanded. "The circumstance that I'm not your favorite? This is exactly why we can't help you, Morgan," my mother said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "You're so bitter and entitled. Amber appreciates everything we do for her." "It's easy to appreciate everything when you're given everything," I replied. My father pointed to the door. "I think you should leave until you can speak to us with respect." I grabbed my purse and car keys. "Don't worry, I won't be back to disrespect you again." As I headed to my car, I could hear my mother saying to my father, "She'll get over it. She always does." But this time was different. This time, I had no intention of getting over it. Later that night, I called my best friend Rachel, who had witnessed my parents' favoritism for years. She listened as I poured out everything that had happened. "I'm done," I told her, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'm done trying to earn their approval. From now on, I'm going to succeed not to prove anything to them, but to prove to myself what I'm capable of without their help." "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to become so successful that they can't ignore me. Not for their validation, but so I never have to hear the words, 'You don't deserve help,' ever again." The morning after the disastrous family dinner, I sat at my small kitchen table in my apartment, coffee growing cold beside me as I mapped out what I called my success plan. The cheap IKEA table wobbled as I wrote furiously, outlining concrete steps and timelines. I wasn't just emotional, I was strategic. First, I needed to advance beyond my entry-level position quickly. My current role at Regional Marketing Associates was stable but had limited growth potential. I needed something with a faster trajectory. I scheduled a meeting with Professor James Harrison, my former business strategy professor who had always believed in my potential. We met at a cafe near the university, where he listened intently as I outlined my situation. Professionally, not personally. I wasn't looking for sympathy. "You were always my most promising student," Professor Harrison said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "I've been waiting for you to reach out. I have connections at Blackwell Consulting. They have an internship program that often fast-tracks to management roles. It's competitive, but with your qualifications, I think you have a shot." 3 days and one impressive interview later, I was accepted into Blackwell's internship program. The catch? It paid barely enough to cover my rent, which meant keeping my bartending job on weekends. My first day at Blackwell introduced me to Stephanie Bennett, a senior analyst who would become both my supervisor and ally. Tall with short auburn hair and a no-nonsense attitude, she intimidated most of the other interns, but I appreciated her directness. "Professor Harrison speaks highly of you," she said, assessing me with sharp green eyes. "He doesn't do that often. Don't make him regret it." My schedule became brutal. Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at Blackwell, studying industry reports during my lunch breaks. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd head straight from the office to night classes for a certification program that would boost my resume. Friday through Sunday nights, I'd bartend until closing, often not getting home until 3 a.m. By month 2, dark circles had become a permanent feature under my eyes. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and sleep for a few hours before starting again. Once weekly meal prep sessions were the only cooking I did, eating the same reheated chicken and vegetables 5 days in a row. During my rare free moments, I developed a business strategy focusing on legal practice management systems, software and workflows that could revolutionize how small to mid-sized law firms operated. The irony that this could have benefited my father's practice wasn't lost on me, but this wasn't about him anymore. Late one night, working at my kitchen table after a double shift bartending, I had my first breakthrough, an innovative approach to client intake that integrated billing and case management. I created a comprehensive presentation with market analysis, implementation strategies, and potential ROI. The next morning, fighting exhaustion, I pitched the concept to Stephanie, who was impressed enough to arrange a meeting with Brian Cooper, the executive heading the legal services division. Cooper was in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for being tough but fair. When I finished my presentation, the conference room fell silent. I stood there, heart-pounding, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. "This is," Cooper began, his expression unreadable, "exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need more of at Blackwell." He smiled. The first time I'd seen him do so. "Morgan, I want you to lead a pilot program implementing this with one of our smaller clients." It was my first real victory, the first validation that my strategy was working. But when I called Rachel to share the news, the conversation was bittersweet. "That's amazing, Morgan. We should celebrate," she insisted. "I can't. I have to work tonight," I replied, already calculating how many hours I could sleep before my shift. "Morgan, you're running yourself into the ground. When was the last time you took a night off?" I couldn't remember. That evening, while checking social media during my break at the bar, I saw that Amber had posted another series of photos from Paris. Her smiling face against the backdrop of the Eiffel Tower, captioned, "So blessed to be studying here. Thanks Mom and Dad for making dreams come true." I put my phone away and returned to mixing drinks, ignoring the hollow feeling in my chest. This wasn't about Amber, I reminded myself. This was about me proving I could succeed without anyone's help, especially my parents. 2 weeks later, I received my first promotion at Blackwell, moving from intern to junior analyst, with a modest but significant salary increase. I could finally quit bartending, though I kept weekend shifts to accelerate my student loan payments. When I signed my new contract, Stephanie handed me a small gift bag containing an expensive pen. "For signing all those important contracts in your future," she said with a knowing smile. I should have felt elated, but that night I sat alone in my apartment, exhausted and oddly empty. I had no one to truly celebrate with who understood what this meant to me. For a brief moment, I considered calling my parents, imagining their pride when they heard about my promotion. Then I remembered their words. "You don't deserve any help." I put away the fantasy and went to bed early. Tomorrow would be another long day, and I had no time for wishful thinking. 6 months into my employment at Blackwell Consulting, things were finally gaining momentum. The pilot program I'd developed for legal practice management was showing promising results, and Brian Cooper had mentioned expanding it to other clients. I'd finally paid off my highest interest student loan and had moved to a slightly better apartment closer to the office. One evening, I received a call from my cousin Heather Collins, my mother's sister's daughter, who had always seemed to understand my position in the family dynamic. Unlike my immediate family, Heather had acknowledged my accomplishments and often provided emotional support when my parents' favoritism became too obvious to ignore. "Morgan, it's been too long," she said when I answered. "I'm in town for a conference and thought we could catch up over dinner." My treat. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, where Heather was already waiting at a table with wine poured. "You look tired," she observed as I sat down. "Thanks," I replied dryly. "That's what happens when you work 70-hour weeks." Heather raised her eyebrows. "Is it worth it?" The question caught me off guard. Was it worth it? The exhaustion? The isolation? The single-minded focus on success? Yes, I finally answered. I'm building something for myself. something no one can take away. As we ate, I found myself opening up about my work at Blackwell, particularly my innovative management system that was gaining attention within the company. It's a comprehensive solution for law firms that integrates client intake, document management, billing, and case tracking, I explained, warming to my subject. The system learns from user behavior to streamline workflows specific to practice areas. I'm calling it LegalSync. Heather seemed genuinely interested, asking insightful questions about market potential and implementation challenges. It felt good to share my vision with someone who understood its significance. "You've really thought this through," she said admiringly. "Have you considered developing it independently? It sounds like something that could be huge." "Eventually, maybe," I admitted. "Right now, I'm developing it within Blackwell's resources, but I've documented everything carefully to protect my intellectual contribution." We parted with promises to stay in touch more regularly, and for the first time in months, I felt the comfort of family connection, albeit not from my immediate family. 2 weeks later, while checking my professional social media accounts, I noticed a LinkedIn update from Professor Kevin Matthews, a business law professor at École Internationale in Paris. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. The update read, "Excited to announce development of new legal practice management system with promising application for international firms. Looking for beta testers." Attached was a concept sheet that outlined a system virtually identical to LegalSync, down to the adaptive workflow technology I'd developed. My hands shook as I clicked on Matthew's profile and saw that he was connected to Amber. Scrolling through his recent activity, I found a post thanking his brilliant research assistant for her insights on American legal practices. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Heather had told Amber about my project during one of their weekly calls. Amber, desperate to impress in Paris, had passed the information to her professor, who was now developing it as his own concept. I immediately called Heather, who answered on the fourth ring. "How could you?" I demanded without preamble. "You told Amber about LegalSync, didn't you?" A pause. "I might have mentioned your work to her," Heather said carefully. "We were just catching up. And you didn't think she would share it with others? That professor she works with is now developing MY system." Heather's tone turned defensive. "Morgan, you're overreacting. Ideas get shared all the time in academia. Besides, you said yourself you're developing it through Blackwell. That doesn't make it public domain. This was intellectual theft, and you facilitated it." "Look," Heather sighed, "I know you've always been competitive with Amber, but this jealousy isn't healthy. She's just trying to make connections in a difficult field." The familiar accusation of jealousy, my family's go-to explanation for any objection I raised, made my blood boil. "This isn't about jealousy," I said coldly. "It's about betrayal. I won't forget this, Heather." I hung up, only for my phone to ring again almost immediately. My parents. "Morgan, this has to stop," my father said without greeting. "Heather told us you accused Amber of stealing some business idea." "Of course she had. It's not an accusation if it's true," I replied. "Professor Matthews is developing my system, and Amber gave him the information." "For heaven's sake," my mother interjected. "Amber mentioned your work to her professor because she was proud of you. If anything, she was trying to help." "Help? By giving away my intellectual property without permission?" "You're just jealous that Amber is making important connections while you're stuck at your consulting job," my father said dismissively. "Kevin Matthews is a renowned expert. If he's interested in similar concepts, it validates your work. You should be grateful." I laughed bitterly. "Grateful that my idea is being stolen? That's rich. Even for you two. We didn't raise you to be so selfish," my mother said, her voice tight with disapproval. "Family supports each other." "Funny, I don't recall receiving much support from this family," I retorted. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with my father's declaration that I needed to grow up and stop blaming others for my problems. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall as despair washed over me. Not only had my idea been stolen, but my family had once again taken Amber's side without hesitation. For a moment, I considered giving up on LegalSync, on proving myself, on everything. Then I remembered my documentation. From the beginning, I'd kept detailed records of my development process, dated notes, workflow diagrams, early prototypes, and email exchanges with Stephanie and Brian. I had evidence this was my creation. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Walter Scott, Blackwell's in-house counsel. A distinguished man in his 60s with a reputation for fierce protection of the company's interests, Scott listened attentively as I explained the situation and presented my documentation. "This is concerning," he acknowledged after reviewing my evidence, "particularly since we're considering this system for broader implementation within the firm. I'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately." "What about my personal protection?" I asked. "I developed significant portions of this on my own time." Scott studied me with shrewd eyes. "Smart of you to document everything so thoroughly. I'll include language acknowledging your personal intellectual contribution while asserting Blackwell's development rights. It's unusual, but given the circumstances, I think we can accommodate this dual protection." As I left his office, I felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. I hadn't lost everything, not yet, but the family I'd once trusted was now actively working against me. Even if unintentionally, the path forward was clear. I needed to succeed not just for myself, but despite them. 1 year after joining Blackwell Consulting, I found myself in a position I could hardly have imagined during those dark days following the Paris announcement. LegalSync had moved beyond the pilot program to full implementation with 3 law firms, generating significant revenue and client satisfaction. My name was becoming known throughout the company as an innovator who delivered results. The cease and desist letter Walter Scott had sent to Professor Matthews had been effective. The professor had backed down quickly, claiming it was all a misunderstanding and that his project was conceptually different, a face-saving lie that nevertheless accomplished what I needed. My intellectual property was protected, and Amber had been forced to admit to our parents that she had indeed shared my confidential work without permission. My parents had called once after that revelation, my mother's voice uncharacteristically subdued as she said, "We may have jumped to conclusions about the situation with Amber's professor." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was the closest thing to vindication I'd received from them in years. I accepted it with cool politeness, making it clear I wasn't interested in discussing the matter further. The professional victory came with a new opportunity. I was assigned to work directly with CEO Christopher Reynolds on a major account with international connections. Reynolds was legendary within Blackwell, brilliant, demanding, and known for advancing the careers of those who impressed him. "Morgan Taylor," he said during our first meeting, pronouncing my name with deliberate care. "Brian Cooper says you're the best analyst he's seen in a decade." High praise from a man who rarely compliments anyone. I maintained eye contact, refusing to show intimidation. "I appreciate the opportunity to work with you, Mr. Reynolds. I've studied your approach to the Westfield merger extensively." A slight smile crossed his face. "Then you know I expect nothing short of excellence." The Reynolds project consumed my life entirely. I worked 14-hour days, often sleeping on the office couch rather than going home. My apartment became little more than a place to store my clothes and collect mail. Social engagements, what few I had maintained, fell away completely. My body began to protest the abuse. Persistent headaches became my constant companion. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. I ignored the symptoms, pushing through with caffeine and determination. Then came the collapse. During a presentation to Reynolds and the executive team, the room began to spin. My vision tunneled, words slurring as I tried to continue. The next thing I knew, I was in an ambulance, an IV in my arm. Severe dehydration and exhaustion, the emergency room doctor informed me. "Your body is shutting down from stress. This isn't sustainable." I spent 2 days in the hospital, during which time only Rachel visited. She brought clothes, toiletries, and a stern lecture about self-care. "This isn't success, Morgan," she said, gesturing to the hospital room. "This is self-destruction." My nurse, Brenda Martinez, became an unexpected source of wisdom during my short stay. In her 50s, with adult children of my age, she spoke to me with the kind of maternal concern I'd rarely experienced. "I see young people like you all the time," she said while checking my IV, "killing themselves to prove something. Let me tell you what I tell my own kids. No success is worth your health. Dead achievers don't enjoy their accomplishments. Her words hit home in a way nothing else had. When she brought discharge papers on the second day, she included a handwritten note with recommendations for therapy and stress management resources. Success and self-care aren't mutually exclusive, she wrote. Find your balance before life forces it on you. Returning to work, I was surprised to find not criticism for my collapse, but concern. Christopher Reynolds himself stopped by my desk. My father worked himself into a heart attack at 42, he said without preamble. Left my mother a widow with 3 kids. Don't follow his example. Blackwell needs sustainable excellence, not martyrs. He assigned Tiffany Wright, another analyst, to split my workload. Initially resentful of what I perceived as a demotion, I soon recognized it as the lifeline it was. Tiffany was brilliant in her own right, with complementary skills to mine and a much healthier approach to work-life balance. I leave at 6 every day. No exceptions, she told me matter-of-factly. My family knows dinner is at 7, and I don't miss it. Somehow, the work still gets done. I watched her, mystified by this concept of boundaries, and slowly began implementing small changes myself. A regular lunch break away from my desk, an exercise class twice a week, actual groceries in my refrigerator instead of just coffee and condiments. As my health improved, so did my work. The clearer thinking that came with proper rest led to more efficient analysis and creative problem-solving. Reynolds noticed. "You're doing better work in 40 hours than you were in 80, he remarked during a review session. Keep it up. Then came the opportunity I hadn't dared hope for so soon, a chance to present at the International Business Solutions Conference in Paris. My research on legal practice management systems had caught the attention of industry leaders, and Blackwell wanted me to represent them. It's a significant honor, Reynolds said. Only senior staff typically attend. But your work on LegalSync deserves the spotlight. My immediate thought was of Amber, still studying in Paris. I hadn't spoken to her since the intellectual property incident, though I occasionally saw her social media posts, increasingly infrequent and lacking their former enthusiasm. The conference was scheduled for May 15th. As I marked it in my calendar, an email notification popped up on my screen, a message from my mother, the first in months. Amber's student exhibition is May 14-16 inches Paris. We're all going. It would mean a lot if you could be there too. Time to put the past behind us. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps more perfect, depending on one's perspective. I had to choose. Attend my sister's exhibition as a gesture of family reconciliation, or present at a conference that could catapult my career to new heights. My mother called the next day, pressuring me directly. Amber specifically asked if you would come. She feels terrible about what happened with her professor. This is her extending an olive branch. I have a professional commitment, I explained. An international conference where I'm presenting. In Paris? My mother sounded surprised. That's perfect then. You can do both. The schedules conflict, I said, not elaborating that I would be preparing for my presentation during Amber's exhibition hours. My father got on the line. Morgan, family should come first. This art show is a huge moment for your sister. And this conference is a huge moment for me, I countered. There will be other conferences, he argued. And there will be other exhibitions, I replied. The conversation ended in familiar territory. Accusations that I was selfish, that I never supported Amber, that I needed to grow up and recognize what's truly important. That night, I sat in my apartment weighing my options. The professional choice was clear. The conference represented a pivotal opportunity. But the emotional weight of once again being labeled the unsupportive sister, the family disappointment, felt heavier than I wanted to admit. I called Rachel for perspective. What would you do if your parents weren't involved? She asked after listening to my dilemma. If this were just about your career versus attending a peer's art show, the answer was immediate. I'd go to the conference. Then that's your answer, she said simply. You're not choosing against Amber. You're choosing for yourself. I sent a carefully worded email to my parents explaining that while I wished Amber success with her exhibition, I would be presenting at the conference. I offered to meet the family for dinner afterward if schedules permitted. The reply came from my father. Your priorities are clear. Don't bother with dinner. I closed my laptop, a strange sense of peace settling over me. For perhaps the first time, I had made a choice for my career without guilt or second guessing. Whatever happened in Paris, I would be there on my own terms, not as an afterthought to Amber's moment. Paris in May was everything the postcards promised. A city blooming with spring flowers, cafes spilling onto sunlit sidewalks, the Seine reflecting a perfect blue sky, none of which I noticed as I entered the Grand Hotel des Congrès, where the International Business Solutions Conference was being held. My presentation was scheduled for the second day of the conference, which gave me time to attend sessions, network with industry leaders, and fight the persistent knot of anxiety in my stomach. Not about speaking, I had prepared extensively and knew my material cold, but about the possibility of running into my family somewhere in this city. The morning of my presentation, I dressed carefully in a tailored charcoal suit, applied makeup with precision, and repeated my personal mantra: your worth isn't determined by their recognition. The conference hall was filled to capacity when I took the stage. 200 industry professionals had come to hear about LegalSync and its potential applications across international legal frameworks. As the lights dimmed and my opening slide appeared, everything beyond the podium faded away. For 45 minutes, I guided the audience through the system's development, implementation challenges, success metrics, and future applications. The questions afterward were engaged and thoughtful, industry leaders building on my concepts with their own insights. When it ended, I received what the conference organizer later told me was a rare standing ovation. You've made quite an impression, Christopher Reynolds said, appearing at my side as attendees swarmed forward to exchange business cards. Blackwell is fortunate to have you. It was during this post-presentation rush that I spotted him. Professor Kevin Matthews, standing at the back of the hall, his expression a mixture of discomfort and reluctant admiration. Our eyes met briefly before he turned and disappeared into the crowd. The confrontation I had half expected didn't materialize until the evening reception. I was engaged in conversation with a senior partner from a London firm when I felt a presence at my elbow. Miss Taylor, I believe we have a mutual acquaintance, Matthews said, his British accent more pronounced in person than it had been during our brief legal exchanges. I excused myself from the conversation and turned to face him fully. Professor Matthews. Yes, I believe we do. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Your presentation was illuminating, particularly given certain similarities to research I began exploring last year. Research based on confidential information improperly shared with you, I replied, keeping my voice level. Information you attempted to develop as your own until legal intervention became necessary. Matthews glanced around nervously. That's a matter of interpretation. Your sister merely mentioned concepts in broad terms. My sister had no right to share any aspects of my work, and you knew it wasn't yours to develop. I maintained steady eye contact. But that's in the past now. As today demonstrated, LegalSync has evolved well beyond those initial concepts. Indeed. He cleared his throat. I understand Amber is no longer focusing on business applications in her studies. This was news to me. Is that so? Yes, she's returned to pure art history. Perhaps for the best. He offered a thin smile. Well, congratulations on your success. I should rejoin my colleagues. I watched him retreat, feeling oddly hollow. The confrontation I'd anticipated had been anticlimactic. Matthews was ultimately insignificant in my journey. The real confrontation awaited me at the hotel restaurant where I had gone to celebrate with a quiet dinner alone. I was midway through my entree when I heard the familiar voices, my mother's laugh, my father's authoritative tone, and Amber's softer responses. They were being seated 3 tables away, none of them having noticed me yet. My father looked distinguished, as always, in a blue blazer. My mother elegant in a patterned dress I didn't recognize. And Amber looked different. Thinner, subdued, her once bouncy demeanor replaced by something more restrained. I had 2 choices. Quietly ask for my check and leave unnoticed, or acknowledge their presence. Self-preservation argued for the former. Something deeper pushed me toward the latter. Before I could decide, my mother looked up and our eyes met. Her mouth formed a small O of surprise before she leaned over to my father, whispering something that made him turn sharply in my direction. Amber was the last to look, and when she did, her expression was unreadable. My father's face flushed, that familiar danger sign, as he stood and approached my table. I straightened my spine, bracing myself. "Morgan," he said stiffly, "I didn't realize your conference was at this hotel." "It isn't. The conference was at the Grand Hotel des Congrès. I'm staying here." "I see." He glanced back at my mother and Amber, who were watching intently. "Your presentation was today?" "Yes." "It went very well. Thank you for asking." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before he said, "Your mother and I attended Amber's exhibition opening this afternoon. She sold 2 pieces." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "Congratulations to her." Another pause. "Would you care to join us? We've just been seated." The invitation surprised me. I'm nearly finished with my meal. Perhaps for dessert then. I considered refusing, but curiosity won out. All right, for dessert. Minutes later, I found myself seated at their table, acute awareness of every glance and shifted position making the space between us seem vast despite the physical proximity. "You look well," my mother offered after the waiter had taken my dessert order. "Working for that consulting firm agrees with you." "Blackwell." "Yes, it does." "Morgan's just presented at an international conference," my father announced, as if they hadn't been dismissive of this very event days earlier. "It was about that legal system you developed, wasn't it?" Amber asked, her first words to me in over a year. I nodded. "Legal sync. It's being implemented in firms across the U.S. and potentially expanding to European markets." "That's really impressive," she said, and seemed to mean it. "Morgan always was driven," my father said, his tone suggesting this was not entirely a compliment. "I had to be," I replied, the words escaping before I could filter them. My mother's expression tightened. "What is that supposed to mean?" The question hung in the air, an invitation to either retreat into polite evasion or advance into dangerous territory. I chose the latter. It means I learned early that if I wanted something, I had to make it happen myself. No one was going to hand me $80,000 for a program in Paris. My father's face darkened. "We're not doing this here." "Doing what, Dad?" "Having an honest conversation for once?" "Morgan," my mother warned. "No. I think we should clear the air," I continued, surprising myself with my calmness. "You told me I didn't deserve help." Those exact words. Do you have any idea what that does to a child, to hear that from her parents? "You're twisting what happened," my father said. "It was about Amber's specific opportunity. It was about what it's always been about," I interrupted. "Amber needed opportunities more than I did because she was the favorite. Just admit it." "That's ridiculous," my mother scoffed. But her eyes darted away. "Is it? Then explain why equal college funds became unequal. Explain why her art supplies were essential but my academic needs were luxuries. Explain why. Because you remind me too much of myself." My mother's outburst silenced the table. Her hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "Your drive, your independence, it's everything I gave up when I married your father and had you girls." I stared at her, stunned. "What?" "I had scholarships too, you know. Offers from graduate programs. But I chose family instead. And sometimes," she looked away, "sometimes when I see you achieving everything I walked away from, it's hard not to resent how easily you seem to manage what I couldn't." The revelation left me speechless. "Your mother doesn't mean that," my father said automatically. "Yes, Richard, I do," she replied quietly. "We've never been fair to Morgan, and it's time we admitted it." "I've spent my life trying to make you proud," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We know," my father said, but offered nothing more. Amber reached across the table toward me, but I pulled my hand away, standing abruptly. "I need to go," I said, dropping money on the table for my dessert. "Congratulations on your exhibition, Amber. I hope it goes well." I walked out of the restaurant with my head high, ignoring my father's call to wait. The night air of Paris hit my face, cool and refreshing after the stifling atmosphere inside. For the first time, I truly understood that this journey wasn't about proving anything to my parents. They were caught in their own web of regrets and projections that had nothing to do with my actual worth. As I waited for a taxi, a voice called my name. Turning, I saw a man approaching, Samuel Davidson, one of the venture capitalists who had attended my presentation. "Miss Taylor, I'm glad I caught you. I've been thinking about your system all day," he said, excitement evident in his voice. "I believe there's significant potential for development beyond Blackwell's current applications. I'd like to discuss investment possibilities, if you're interested." I smiled, the weight of the family confrontation already beginning to lift. "I'm very interested, Mr. Davidson. Shall we discuss it over a drink?" As we walked toward the hotel bar, I realized that while one door had definitively closed behind me, another was opening ahead, one that I had created entirely for myself. The flight back from Paris marked a turning point. While other passengers watched movies or slept, I drafted a business plan on my laptop, energized by my conversation with Samuel Davidson. His interest in LegalSync wasn't just flattering, it was validating. A seasoned investor with a track record of successful tech ventures believed in my creation enough to back it financially. By the time we landed, I had the framework for what would become Taylor Legal Systems, a company dedicated to developing and expanding LegalSync beyond Blackwell's limited vision. The first hurdle was extricating myself and my intellectual property from Blackwell. I scheduled a meeting with Walter Scott, the in-house counsel who had helped protect LegalSync from Matthews. "I want to develop LegalSync independently," I told him directly. "I understand Blackwell has claims to the work I've done while employed here, but I'm prepared to negotiate." Scott leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Christopher Reynolds mentioned you might be heading in this direction after your success in Paris. He's not eager to lose you." "I'm not looking to compete with Blackwell," I explained. "My vision for LegalSync goes beyond legal practice management into areas Blackwell isn't currently exploring." 3 weeks and several tense negotiations later, we reached an agreement. Blackwell would retain implementation rights for existing clients and receive a percentage of future licensing fees, while I would own the core intellectual property and development rights for new applications. When I submitted my resignation, Christopher Reynolds surprised me. "I expected this 6 months ago," he said, his expression unreadable. "Most innovators eventually want ownership of their creations. I'll be watching your progress with interest, Morgan." With Davidson's initial investment and my own savings, I leased a small office space, hired 2 developers, and launched Taylor Legal Systems. The transition from employee to entrepreneur was both exhilarating and terrifying. Every decision, from logo design to technical specifications, rested ultimately with me. 3 months after my return from Paris, my parents reached out. The email came from my mother, tentatively suggesting dinner to talk things through. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the clean break I'd made in Paris. But another part, the part that had never stopped hoping for genuine connection, agreed to meet. The restaurant was neutral territory, a mid-priced Italian place downtown. My parents arrived first, both looking slightly uncomfortable in the casual setting. "You look well," my mother offered as I sat down. "We've been reading about your new company online. It sounds impressive." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "It's been challenging, but rewarding." My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been doing some reflection since Paris. We may not have been as supportive as we could have been." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received before. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. The conversation progressed with cautious civility until my mother mentioned Amber. "She's back home, actually." Paris didn't work out as planned. I raised my eyebrows. "She didn't complete the program?" "No," my father admitted. "After the first year, her professors suggested she might be better suited to a different path. The exhibition you missed was actually her final project before withdrawing." The news surprised me. Amber had always been presented as the artistic genius, the creative spirit who needed nurturing. "What's she doing now?" I asked. My parents exchanged a look before my mother answered. She's staying with us while figuring out next steps. She's mentioned interest in business administration, actually. The implication hung unspoken in the air. Morgan, my father began, his tone shifting to the one he used for business negotiations. We've been thinking. With your new company growing, perhaps there might be a position for Amber? Something entry-level to help her get established? I stared at them, momentarily speechless. After everything, the years of favoritism, the "you don't deserve help" declaration, the intellectual property theft. They were asking me to hire Amber? My company is 3 months old, I said slowly. We're a team of 4 people working around the clock to meet development deadlines. I don't have resources for someone with no relevant experience or education. She's your sister, my mother said, as if that answered everything. Yes. And I wish her well in whatever path she chooses. But Taylor Legal Systems isn't a family charity. My father's expression hardened. So that's it? Your sister needs help, and you turn your back on her? The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The way you turned your back on me when I needed help with graduate school? Or when I asked for support starting my career? The difference is, I didn't expect assistance. Amber always has. The dinner ended shortly after, with tense goodbyes and my father's parting shot. I thought success might have made you less bitter, Morgan. I see I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Samuel Davidson. Morgan, I've had an unusual email from someone claiming to be your father, he said without preamble. He expressed concerns about your company's viability and suggested I reconsider my investment. Any idea what that's about? Cold anger washed over me. My father is not involved with my company in any capacity. His concerns are personal, not professional. Davidson's tone remained neutral. I assumed as much, but thought you should know. Family complications can impact businesses more than people realize. They won't impact mine, I assured him. My family and my business are completely separate entities. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, hands shaking with fury. My father had actually attempted to undermine my investor relationships because I wouldn't hire Amber. The betrayal cut deep, even after everything else. I called my uncle Gregory Mitchell, my father's brother, and the family member I had always felt most connected to. Unlike my parents, Uncle Greg had attended my college graduation and sent congratulatory cards for every achievement. I'm not surprised, he said after I explained what happened. Richard has always been protective of Amber to the point of blindness. But contacting your investors crosses a line. What should I do? Legally distance yourself, he advised. I hate to say this about my own brother, but document everything. If he's willing to contact Davidson, he might try other interference. Following his advice, I consulted an attorney about establishing clear legal boundaries. We drafted formal letters to my parents stating that any further attempts to contact my business associates would be considered tortious interference. My mother called, tearful and angry. You're threatening legal action against your own parents? Over a simple conversation? It wasn't a conversation, Mom. It was an attempt to sabotage my business because I wouldn't give Amber a job she's not qualified for. Your father was just concerned. No. He was retaliating. There's a difference. The conversation ended with my mother's tearful accusation that I had changed and no longer cared about family. Despite these personal struggles, Taylor Legal Systems secured its first major client, a mid-sized litigation firm in Chicago, seeking a comprehensive practice management solution. The contract was substantial enough to guarantee operational costs for a full year and hired 2 additional developers. On the day we signed the contract, I treated my small team to dinner at an upscale restaurant, raising a toast to our first major milestone. To Taylor Legal Systems, I said, glass raised, built from scratch, against the odds. Later that evening, as I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of a for sale sign in front of my parents' house, the home I'd grown up in. There was no accompanying message, but the implication was clear. My parents were in financial trouble. I sat in my car for a long time, conflicted. Part of me felt vindicated. They were facing consequences for their poor financial decisions, including the extravagant spending on Amber's failed Paris adventure. Another part remembered the home where, despite everything, I had some happy childhood memories. The next morning, I called my Aunt Patricia Wilson, my mother's sister who had always been more rational than either of my parents. Is it true they're selling the house? I asked after pleasantries. She sighed. Yes. Your father made some bad investments, and they've been struggling since Amber returned. The Paris program didn't refund the second year's tuition after she withdrew. I see. The information shouldn't have satisfied me, but some small part of me couldn't help feeling the justice in it. They're too proud to tell you, Aunt Patricia continued. But they're in serious trouble, Morgan. The house has been on the market for months with no offers. After our call, I contacted a real estate attorney and made arrangements through a blind trust to purchase my parents' home at well above market value, with conditions allowing them to remain living there while paying modest rent to the investment company that had purchased it. They would never know I was their benefactor. My pride wouldn't allow it, and neither would theirs. But I couldn't bring myself to let them lose the family home, despite everything. The day after closing the deal, I drove home late from the office, exhaustion seeping into my bones. For months, I'd been working 16-hour days, driven by determination to prove Taylor Legal Systems' viability. The company was succeeding beyond even my optimistic projections, but the personal cost was mounting. At a red light, I found myself nodding off, jerking awake only when a horn blared behind me. Shaken, I pulled into a parking lot to collect myself. The near miss was a wake-up call. I was pushing myself to the brink, just as I had at Blackwell. For what? To prove something to parents who had made it clear they would never fully recognize my worth? To show Amber what real achievement looked like? Or was I still that desperate child, seeking validation from people incapable of giving it? The realization hit me with unexpected force. I was free of my parents' financial control, but still chained to their emotional impact. True independence would mean success on my terms, not as a response to their failings. It was time to redefine what winning looked like. 2 years after the Paris confrontation, Taylor Legal Systems had grown beyond my initial business plan projections. We occupied an entire floor in a downtown office building, employed 27 people, and had clients across North America and Europe. LegalSync had evolved into a suite of products serving various aspects of legal practice management, with expansion into adjacent industries on the horizon. My personal life, however, remained virtually non-existent. I lived in an expensive condo I rarely saw in daylight, maintained superficial friendships with a few business associates, and spoke to Rachel once every few weeks. Brief conversations that always ended with her concern about my work-life balance. The watershed moment came unexpectedly. I was preparing for an interview with Business Innovators magazine, which had selected me for their annual Entrepreneurs to Watch feature. The writer had sent questions in advance, including one that stopped me cold. What personal sacrifices have been most worthwhile in building your success? I stared at the question for a long time, uncomfortable with the honest answer. I had sacrificed everything: health, relationships, any semblance of personal joy, in pursuit of proving my worth. But was it worthwhile? Had I actually won anything meaningful? Or merely created a different kind of emptiness? Before I could formulate a professional-sounding deflection, my assistant interrupted with news that would force me to confront these questions directly. "Your Aunt Patricia is on line 1, she said. "She says it's urgent." Aunt Patricia never called my office. Something was wrong. "Patricia? What's happened?" "It's your parents," she said without preamble. "They've put the house up for sale again. Richard made another bad investment, and this time they're truly underwater. The blind trust that bought the house last time has right of first refusal, but they're asking significantly more now, trying to capitalize on neighborhood development." The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents were trying to profit from the very safety net I'd anonymously provided. "I see," I said, my tone neutral. "Why are you telling me this?" A pause. "Because despite everything, Morgan, they're still your family, and Amber is living with them again. She'd be displaced too." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, turning over my options. I could simply walk away. They had no legal claim on me, and I'd already saved their home once without acknowledgement. Or I could help again, remaining the anonymous benefactor they'd never appreciate. Neither option sat well with me. Both felt like continuing the unhealthy patterns that had defined our relationship for years. The magazine interview question came back to me. What sacrifices have been worthwhile? Perhaps the better question was, what sacrifices were still required? And which ones could I finally stop making? I needed perspective from someone who understood family complexity but wasn't enmeshed in mine. I called Professor James Harrison, who had been a mentor since graduate school. The problem isn't the house, Morgan, he said after I explained the situation. The problem is that you're still defining yourself in relation to your parents' actions, either in alignment with or opposition to them. True independence means making choices based solely on your own values, not as reactions to their behavior. So what would you do? I'd ask myself, if my parents were strangers, would I help them? If the answer is yes, then help, because it aligns with your values. If the answer is no, then don't help, again because it aligns with your values. Either way, make the choice for yourself, not because of or in spite of them. After our call, I made arrangements through the same blind trust to purchase the house again, but with stricter conditions this time. Professional financial management for my parents required contributions to a maintenance fund and a decade-long restriction on selling. The terms were accepted, though my parents reportedly complained about the corporate vultures taking advantage of their situation. The irony might have amused me once. Now it just felt sad. 3 days after finalizing the arrangements, I was driving home late from the office when my phone rang. It was Amber, the first direct contact we'd had in over 2 years. Morgan? Her voice sounded small, uncertain. I know we haven't talked, but I didn't know who else to call. Mom and Dad won't listen to me. What's wrong? They're fighting about money again. Dad made some investment without telling Mom, and they lost a lot. They keep saying everything will be fine now that the house sold for more than they expected, but they're talking about using the money for another investment scheme instead of paying off debt. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Amber, I'm not sure what you expect me to do. They don't exactly value my financial advice. I know, but you're the only one who's ever stood up to them, who sees them clearly. I just thought maybe. Her voice trailed off, and I felt a sudden exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness. How many years had I spent fighting to be seen by these people? How much energy had I expended proving my worth to those incapable of recognizing it? Amber, I can't fix them, I said finally. Neither can you. They have to want to change. I know, she whispered. I just thought. You always seem to know what to do. You've built this amazing company this whole life without them. I wanted some of that confidence, I guess. The admission surprised me. Amber, who had been given everything, envied my self-sufficiency. It wasn't easy, I told her. And it hasn't come without cost. We talked for nearly an hour, the first real conversation we'd had as adults. She told me about her struggles in Paris, how she'd realized midway through that she had no genuine passion for art history but felt trapped by our parents' expectations, how she'd eventually admitted defeat and returned home, only to face our father's disappointment and our mother's smothering attempt to fix her path. I'm sorry about what happened with your business idea, she said suddenly. With Professor Matthews. I didn't understand what I was sharing at the time, but that doesn't excuse it. You worked so hard for everything, and I just handed your work to someone else without thinking. The apology, unexpected and seemingly sincere, caught me off guard. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. After we hung up, I felt oddly light, as if something long clenched inside me had finally relaxed. The conversation hadn't solved anything concrete, but it had shifted something important nonetheless. I was so distracted by these thoughts that I nearly missed a red light, swerving to a stop at the last second as a truck barreled through the intersection where I would have been. The near miss left me shaking, adrenaline coursing through my system. It was the second time in recent months I'd almost had an accident due to exhaustion and distraction. This time, it could have been fatal. I pulled into a parking lot and called Rachel. I need help, I admitted, the words foreign on my tongue. I'm working myself to death, literally. Rachel, bless her, didn't say I told you so. What do you need? She asked simply. Balance. Perspective. I don't know how to do this. How to succeed without sacrificing everything else. You start by acknowledging you can't do it alone, she said. Which you just did. And then you let people help you, which you're doing now. The rest, we'll figure out together. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my executive team. For 2 years, I'd maintained tight control over every aspect of Taylor legal systems, unable to fully trust others with my creation. It was time for that to change. I need to restructure my role, I announced. I've been operating as if the company can't function without my direct oversight of every detail, and it's not sustainable, for me or for our growth. We spent the day redefining responsibilities, delegating authority, and creating systems that would allow the company to function effectively without my constant involvement. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. That evening, for the first time in years, I left the office at 5:30 p.m. I had dinner at a restaurant alone, not working through the meal, just experiencing the simple pleasure of good food and quiet observation. Afterward, I walked through a park I'd driven past hundreds of times but never visited. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. One evening of balance wouldn't undo years of workaholism. But it was a start, a conscious choice to define success differently. The following week, I received an unexpected invitation. My cousin's wedding, which would include the entire extended family, including my parents and Amber. My instinct was to send a gift and a polite decline, avoiding the potential drama of family interaction. Instead, I RSVP'd yes. It was time to face my family, not as the desperate to prove herself daughter or the successful but bitter entrepreneur, but simply as Morgan, a woman who had built a life on her own terms and was finally learning that true success encompassed more than professional achievement. The Westfield Country Club was decorated with tasteful flower arrangements and twinkling lights for my cousin Jessica's wedding. As I handed my car to the valet, I took a deep breath, mentally preparing for the first family gathering I'd attended in nearly 3 years. Inside, the cocktail hour was in full swing. I spotted aunt and uncles, cousins, and family friends, people who had been peripheral characters in the drama between my parents, Amber, and me. Many seemed surprised to see me, offering cautious greetings tinged with the awkwardness of people who had heard rumors but didn't know which ones to believe. I was at the bar ordering a glass of wine when I sensed a presence beside me. My father, looking older than I remembered, his hair now more gray than brown. "Morgan," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "you look well." "Thank you," I replied. "You too." We stood in uncomfortable silence until he cleared his throat. "Your company was featured in the Boston Business Journal last month. Quite an impressive profile." It wasn't quite an olive branch, but it was the closest thing to acknowledgement of my success he had ever offered voluntarily. "Thank you for noticing," I said, adding after a moment, "How have you been?" The simple question seemed to catch him off guard, as if he'd expected immediate conflict rather than basic courtesy. "Managing," he replied. "The practice is stable, though I've been considering partial retirement. Not as young as I used to be." Another silence fell, broken when the bartender delivered my wine. "We should find our seats," my father said. "Your mother will want to know you're here." The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. My cousin and her partner exchanging vows beneath a flower-covered arch, their obvious joy requiring no elaborate production. I found myself unexpectedly moved, perhaps by the contrast between their happiness and my own, carefully constructed but emotionally sparse life. At the reception, I was seated at a table with distant relatives who knew little about the family tensions, making conversation relatively easy. I was returning from the buffet when my mother approached, elegant in a navy dress I didn't recognize. "You missed the family photo," she said, her tone balanced between accusation and sadness. "I wasn't aware there was one scheduled," I replied honestly. She hesitated, then said, "There's always a family photo at these events." "I've missed a lot of family events, Mom." The simple statement hung between us, laden with unspoken history. Her expression softened slightly. "Yes, you have," she acknowledged. "Would you sit with me for a moment, away from the crowd?" We found a quiet corner in the venue's garden area, taking seats on a decorative bench. For several minutes, neither of us spoke, the music and laughter from the reception creating a distant backdrop to our silence. I've been in therapy, my mother finally said, the admission clearly difficult for her. Since Paris, actually. Your father doesn't know. I tell him I'm meeting friends for lunch every Tuesday. I turn to look at her, genuinely surprised. That's good, I think. She nodded, twisting her wedding ring nervously. I've been talking about you. About Amber. About the way we parented you both so differently. Her voice caught. The therapist helped me see patterns I couldn't recognize on my own. How I projected my own regrets onto you. Punishing you for having the drive I gave up. Tears formed in her eyes. I was so wrong, Morgan. The things we said to you, the way we treated you, there's no excuse. I can try to explain it, but I can't justify it. It was the apology I had wanted for years, yet now that it was happening, I felt strangely detached, as if watching a scene in a movie rather than experiencing it directly. Why are you telling me this now? I asked quietly. Because I don't want to lose you completely, she admitted. And because for the first time, I can see clearly how much damage I've done. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I recognize my failures, that I'm trying to understand why I made the choices I did. We talked for nearly an hour, a real conversation unlike any we'd ever had. She shared insights from her therapy, reflections on her own upbringing, the fears and insecurities that had shaped her parenting. I listened more than spoke, neither accepting nor rejecting her explanations, simply allowing them to exist between us. As we prepared to return to the reception, she touched my arm hesitantly. I am proud of you, Morgan. Not just for your success, but for your resilience. For becoming who you are despite us, not because of us. The words I had longed to hear for so long now arrived too late to fill the void they were meant for. Yet they mattered nonetheless. Not as validation I still desperately needed, but as recognition of a truth I had already come to accept on my own. Later, during the dancing portion of the reception, Amber approached me. Like our parents, she looked different. More substantial somehow. Less the flighty artistic persona and more a woman coming into her own identity. I didn't think you'd come, she said, watching the dancers rather than looking at me directly. Neither did I, honestly. I admitted. I'm working at a graphic design firm now, she offered. Entry-level position, but it suits me better than fine arts ever did. I'm taking business classes at night. I nodded, unsure what response she was looking for. I used to be so jealous of you, she continued, surprising me. Everyone thought I was the lucky one because Mom and Dad paid for everything, gave me everything. But you were free in a way I never was. You built your life on your terms. It didn't feel like freedom at the time, I told her. It felt like abandonment. I know that now. She finally turned to face me. I've had to start over completely at 25, learning how to be an actual adult without their constant intervention. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. I think I understand you better now than I ever did growing up. Our conversation lacked the emotional intensity of my talk with our mother, but it had a genuineness I hadn't expected. We weren't suddenly going to be close sisters, but perhaps we could build some form of adult relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. As the wedding reception wound down, I found myself at the bar beside my father once more. He seemed mellower than earlier, whether from alcohol or the festive atmosphere. I couldn't tell. Your mother told me you two had a long talk, he said, staring into his scotch. We did. He nodded slowly. She's been different lately. More reflective. He glanced at me. I haven't been as receptive to change, I suppose. Old dogs and new tricks, and all that. It wasn't an apology. I doubted my father had ever uttered the words "I'm sorry" in his life. But there was an acknowledgement in his tone. A grudging recognition that perhaps he hadn't been infallible. You've done well for yourself, he continued after a pause. Better than I anticipated. If I'm being honest, that was part of the problem, I replied. Your anticipation never matched my potential. He absorbed this with a slow nod. Perhaps not. Another pause. Your system, LegalSync. Some of my colleagues are using it now. They speak highly of it. Thank you for telling me. We left it there. Not reconciled exactly, but with a new, tentative understanding. My father would likely never be the parent I had needed as a child, but perhaps we could establish some form of relationship as adults, based on the people we actually were, rather than the roles we had played for so long. 3 years after that fateful Paris trip, I found myself standing at a podium again, not at an international conference this time, but at a business school graduation where I'd been invited to deliver the commencement address. Looking out at the sea of eager faces, I saw reflections of my younger self, ambitious, determined, ready to prove their worth to the world. Success is often presented as a straightforward equation, I told them. Hard work plus talent equals achievement. What that equation leaves out is the human cost of success pursued at all costs, and the hollow victory of accomplishment without connection. I shared my journey, not the sanitized version I'd once presented in interviews, but the messy, complicated truth of ambition born from rejection, of achievement fueled by the need to prove one's worth. The most valuable lesson I've learned isn't about business strategy or market penetration, I continued. It's that true success can't be measured by the validation we receive from others, particularly from those incapable of seeing our full worth. Real success comes from creating a life aligned with our own values, not as a response to others' expectations or limitations. After the ceremony, I launched a scholarship program for driven students without family financial support, a way of transforming my own painful experience into opportunity for others facing similar challenges. The Morgan Taylor Scholarship would provide not just funding, but mentorship, networking opportunities, and practical support for navigating the business world without family connections. My relationship with my parents remained complicated, neither fully reconciled nor completely estranged. We established cautious boundaries, interacting more as respectful acquaintances than the close family I had once longed for. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and honesty, I had learned, was more valuable than comfortable illusions. Taylor legal systems continued to thrive, though my role had evolved to focus on strategic direction rather than day-to-day operations. I had finally learned to delegate, to trust others with aspects of my creation, and in doing so had created space for a more balanced life, one that included friends, dating, volunteer work, and even occasional lazy Sundays with absolutely nothing productive scheduled. The greatest freedom, I discovered, wasn't in proving my worth to those who had dismissed me. It was in finally understanding that my value had never been dependent on their recognition in the first place. True independence came not from rejecting their help or proving I didn't need it, but from creating my own definition of success, one that encompassed professional achievement alongside personal fulfillment, meaningful connections, and the quiet satisfaction of living authentically on my own terms. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who should have believed in you from the start? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more authentic stories of overcoming life's challenges. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' recognition. It's inherent in who you are and the life you choose to create. Thank you for listening. And may you find the perfect balance between achievement and joy in your own journey.